Yes. Before we introduce our next speaker, I just want to acknowledge one of the people who walked in here. We've been organizing here on the West Side for several years, and the founding member of the Greens on the West Side has come, Mark Sharon. Mark has been doing green politics for longer than most of you are alive. He knew Trotsky and a lot of other interesting political characters. Mark, stand up. Let people know who you are. Mark has recently been to Russia, where he's visited the Greens over there, and he's back. So, okay. Our next speaker is from La Mesa, California, and we've moved from potatoes and T-shirts to campaigns and consensus. Steve Saint has written several books for the Green Party here in California on consensus process and on how to run campaigns. And here he is, one of our co-founders, Steve Saint.
Don't worry, I'm not going to take my shirt off. The other day I went into the city manager's office in La Mesa. And La Mesa is a small suburb of San Diego. It's been around for 80 years, one of the early cities to form when it was far away from San Diego. Now, of course, the divisions have all blurred. But at one time, I think they were like cornfields or something between San Diego and La Mesa. So I went into the city manager's office, as I often do now, and I asked him what was new with government in San Diego County. And the reason that I could walk in and talk to him about this is because I was a candidate in a small town city council race. Now, I didn't win, but one of the things that they do in this small town, and they may do this in small towns or big towns where you're from, and that is that if you're a candidate, the city staff is supposed to treat you like an office holder during the campaign season. Now, this is purely selfish on their part, because they're there for years, and the city council people come and go. And the last thing they want is a yahoo coming in there that got elected, doesn't know anything about city government, and starts changing everything. So what they want to do is they want to indoctrinate all the candidates in the way things are done from their point of view, hoping that when these people get elected, they'll be sympathetic to the city staff and continue the things the way the staff would like it. And that could be good or bad, but the good part for me is that for 6 months, I was treated like an office holder in La Mesa. And if I wanted this particular study, or I wanted these minutes, or I wanted that report, if I wanted a meeting with the mayor, if I wanted a meeting with the city manager, anyone on the staff, they set it up for me, and I went in and I had my meeting. And so being the kind of sucker for educating myself that I am, I set up all these meetings, and I got all these reports, and I learned all this stuff. And most significantly to this little story is I made friends with the city manager. So now, like, I'm friends with this guy. We can go to breakfast, you know. And I'm friends with the mayor. And so I asked the city manager, like, what was new, and he said, well, you know, you got to read this book, because we had talked about my ideas as how Greens would run the city, and he talked about his ideas. And he said, you got to get this book, and he finally gave me his copy because I couldn't get it out of the library fast enough. It's called Reinventing Government. And he says city managers all over the country are reading this book, Reinventing Government. This is the big buzz book among city managers. And so I started reading this book, and I'm into 20 pages, and I'm just totally excited about this book. Because this book is all about how cities are already reinventing themselves, and school districts and supervisor districts and people in government are saying this isn't working. And we've got to reinvent the way things are going. It's not enough just to reform this. We've got to totally come up with new ideas about what government is for and how it does it. So as I'm reading this book and I'm thinking about our experience as Green Party, I suddenly get this idea. Maybe you'll like it, I don't know. When I became a Green, I thought that it was going to be exciting to be a Green because the 90s were going to be the decade of the environment. But I've changed my mind. I'm excited to be a Green because the 90s are going to be the decade of reinventing the United States. Okay? You've already seen it happen. It's happening all over the place. Ross Perot is an example of it. There's a current under there, and all these examples pop up. But we are reinventing this country. And the Greens have this great opportunity to reinvent politics, to reinvent how political parties do what we think they should do. and to reinvent how political parties impact the governmental structure. And to me, that's exciting. Okay, that means we're going to be like, wow, doing something here. Okay. So along these lines, I try to write little things that might be helpful. Like, for instance, I wrote this little thing called Green Campaigns, and Mike says you're all going to get one in your literature pack. I guess the literature pack is on the way. Literature pack is on the way. Anyway, what this is simply a little booklet on some campaigns we ran in La Mesa area. But unlike what you might get in a lot of books on campaigning, this is not about how to win with a small budget, although that's relevant to all of us. But what this book is about is how Greens would run campaigns if they were running them, based upon our values, and how a Green campaign might look a little different than a grassroots Democrat or a grassroots Peace and Freedom or a grassroots Libertarian or whatever. That maybe there's something different about our values that impacts the way we campaign. And I thought, what would those differences be? And in our experiences in La Mesa with running a number of candidates in the primary and in the general, I took notes and I wrote this little book, and I say, hey, this is kind of reinventing the campaign. This is reinventing politics. This is doing things in a green way. So let me just share briefly some of the thoughts I had having done these campaigns. And by the way, I was involved on a campaign team that ran someone for supervisor, someone for city council, and someone for planning group. And we also worked in alliance with a group that was running someone for school board. So I had some experience in the last year on 4 different kinds of campaigns. The first, there's 3 things I want to discuss just briefly, and I think we're going to have more time, right, to get into some details. But there's 3 things that I thought were real significant in terms of what makes a green campaign. And one of them, the first one, I think, is consensus. And consensus is not one of the 10 key values, but it keeps banging around because consensus is kind of like what happens when a lot of those values are put into place. When you start dismantling hierarchy and you start empowering people and you have an egalitarian situation and you remove the barriers, you start to create consensus. And so consensus is kind of like the thing that the values start to create. And so one of the things that we did that we thought we were kind of like excited about was we formed a consensus-based team to run these campaigns. And this collective group was about 8 of us. And I wish I could have got my family involved, Keiko. I was like, I could barely get my mom to vote for me. But, you know, actually my parents voted for Perot. I was excited. So we formed this campaign team, this consensus-based team, and the idea behind the team is that we were all equals, that there was no hierarchy, and that all of our decisions, by our own design, were going to be unanimous. And so it was a very strict kind of consensus thing, but we all liked each other and thought we could do it. Now, this had some impact on the campaign. For instance, we had this collective decision-making process, and we had no hierarchy. And that's kind of a different thing from most campaigns, because most campaigns have a very clear hierarchy. The candidate is at the top. The candidate is the reason why everyone is there. The candidate has the final word. The candidate is the person that the team serves. And so we didn't have that kind of structure. Our candidate's just sitting there like any one of us. And we were all equals. We just said, okay, you have to be the candidate this time. Okay, so Susan was the candidate this time, and I was the candidate that time, or whatever. Now, this has a good effect on the whole situation. One of them is that it allows for the empowerment of candidates. Because Susan Wolf Fleming, for instance, would have never run for office. She's not ambitious enough. She's not excited about getting in front of people. She's not real excited about taking a lot of criticism. And she would have never run if it wasn't for the fact that there were 7 others of us out there saying, Susan, we want you to run, and we'll be behind you. And look, you're just a candidate. But like everything is still the same. It's just us. Okay. So Susan said, all right, well, I'll do that. And there are people out there that will never run for office that should be in office. And they will never run unless a green campaign team empowers them to run and gives them the support and the kind of psychological space where they can get out there. And I know some people in San Diego that should be in office. Most of us should be in office. We have probably more common sense than people that are there now. But most of us are not going to have feel the personal power to do it, and a campaign team can help do that. The second thing in terms of empowerment is it empowers the team, because we're not just ringers, or we're not just like some kind of lackey staff that kind of like, we're in it for the game, and when the campaign's over we leave, or we hope for a job or something. It's like we are equals with the candidate. And this whole hierarchy thing is gone, and the candidate does not become the only place where power is. Power is in the rest of the team, and so the rest of the team felt like they could make statements on behalf of the campaign. We even talked about it. We didn't actually do this, but we talked about the idea of there being some public forums on the same night, and we would send Susan to one of them. We'd send one of our campaign team to the other one and just tell them that, hey, I'm as good as the candidate. I'm on the team. But we decided that they wouldn't understand. But, maybe someday we'll do that and they will understand. And then the other thing that it does, this consensus thing does, is that it creates a culture of consensus for office holders. Because right now, office holders get elected, and then it's up to them what they want to do. It's up to them how accountable they want to be. It's up to them who they think their constituents are. And when you've worked with someone in a consensus situation for months as a candidate and they become an office holder, you create a culture of consensus with that person. And so talking about what Greens should do now is a very natural thing. And I'm really proud. Let me just mention Barbara Carr, for instance. Now, Barbara Carr is a school board member in La Mesa, and she was a candidate in one of the most nationally controversial school board races in the country. They had the New York Times coming out to the PTA forum to hear these people, because the Christian right wanted to take over the school district. And Barbara was part of a slate, 2 Democrats and 1 Green, that were standing up and saying, no, we're not going to let the Christian right take over. We're going to keep it in the hands of the public. And so because of Barbara's affiliation with 2 Democrats and a Democratic campaign manager, they said, look, Barbara, we know you're a Green, but shh, can you not say it? Can you tell your Green friends to hide or something, because this is very conservative and it's hard enough to be a Democrat and win. So really play the Green thing down, please. And Barbara, being willing to work with people, said, well, gee, you guys probably know better, so I'll just do whatever you say. And then she said to us, go ahead and do whatever you want to do, and include me in whatever you want to do, but just don't, I just can't do anything with these people that's Green. They'll get mad. Well, Barbara got more votes than these other 2 Democrats did. Barbara got 50% of the vote in a 3-way race. And she cleaned up, basically. And then the board had proceeded to elect her president of the school board. She wished she could be here, by the way. She was thinking of coming, but she had a prior commitment. I mentioned Barbara because we did not work in a consensus-based campaign situation with Barbara. She had already committed herself to these Democrats and this other manager before we were really connected. But since she got elected, she is very happy to meet with Greens. And we are developing a culture of consensus with her to talk about how the school should be run. And she wants to know what Greens think about the education system. She wants to bring that to the table. And that's what electing Greens is all about. So, hallelujah, Barbara. Now, I'm taking too much time. Let me just go through a couple other things real quick. And these are in the book, and we can talk about them more. The second thing, besides the consensus-based team that's significant in a Green campaign, the second thing is what we call movement, goals, and strategy. And there's a lot of people out there that are talking about a movement versus a party, and I think a lot of us in San Diego just never really got that distinction. We never understood what the difference was. Because we run our movement like it's a party, and we run our party like it's a movement, and we don't see why everyone's fighting. So, for instance, when we run a campaign, we're running it different, because we're part of a movement. And so one of the things, for instance, that we decided to do was to target the untargeted. Now, if you talk to anybody in campaign strategy, you talk about any campaign consultants, you talk to grassroots campaign consultants for the Democratic Party, they will tell you, you must target. You have very little money, you have to figure out who's going to be most likely to vote for you, and you have to spend all your money on them. And everyone will tell you that you're stupid to do otherwise. Now, one of these guys that told me this is a guy named Doug Winslow. Doug Winslow is a number cruncher up in the Bay Area, and he does the number crunching for the California Democratic Party. He makes big money telling them exactly who to send their mailers to. I met Doug Winslow at a conservation California League of Conservation Voters seminar here in Los Angeles a couple years ago. And he told us all about the wisdom and excitement of hiring people like him to figure out exactly who we should go to and knock on their door and give them something. And he said, oh, and by the way, you know, we're a grassroots company, so we don't do this for anybody but Democrats. And so I went up to him after this little workshop and said, well, gee, Doug, you know, I'm with the Green Party, you know, you wouldn't do it for us? And he's like, oh, well, yeah, you know, that's different. You know, let me put it this way, we wouldn't do it for Republicans. But you guys, okay, we would help you. I thought, oh, thank you. Within 6 months, Doug Winslow provided the Democratic Party with a list of green voters so they could mail out cards to our green voters and say, re-register back and be a Democrat and stop George Bush. I called Doug Winslow on the phone. I said, remember me, I'm from the Green Party. Yeah, I remember you. You were going to help us, and you were going to be nice, and we're grassroots, we're all in this together, yeah. Did you provide the numbers to the Democratic Party so they could do a hit piece on us? Well, you know, I'm in business. You know, times are tough. I hung up on him. I mean, I didn't know what else to say. As a movement party, we have to target the untargeted. We have to go to people who are not being targeted, that people have forgotten about. We have to go to, see, and you know this, more money is being spent every year reaching fewer voters. Okay? That's a weird, I don't know, I'm not very good with math. How does that work? That every year you have to spend more money to reach fewer people. And the reason is because the regular voter, what the targeter and the number cruncher considers the regular voter, are the people that go out and vote all the time and are active and stuff. And if you don't fall in that category, nobody spends a dime on you. Unless they have a really big campaign, and after they've targeted, then they can do some more general stuff. And so we have to target these people. We have to target the untargeted. Now, I'm not saying ignore the possible, you know, Jerry Brown Democrats and environmentalists and stuff. I'm not saying ignore people who would have affinity for our message. But we have to also go after people who don't know anything about this and probably don't care about the political process any longer. And so we did that. What we did is we went to apartment complexes in La Mesa, and we asked the city manager, my buddy here, to tell me where they all were. And he gave me planning and zoning maps and showed me where the R3 zones were. So we knew exactly where all the apartments were in La Mesa. And we went and we gave out 8,000 tabloid newspapers, and we hit every apartment building in my town so that we could get people who are not getting anything in their mailbox from these candidates and figure no one cares about them. We also tabled at stores and had stuff out on other initiatives and the Green Party. It was like a regular movement kind of table, but we also had our campaign stuff there. And some other movement kind of things. We had a youth forum. We said, hey, you know, government affects youth, but they can't vote. So no one cares about youth. So we're going to do something about that. So we got kids from every school on a panel, and we did this for the public, basically. Said, look, the kids are going to tell us what's wrong with the system. We're not going to, instead of having adults sit around and figure out what to do about education. So we had all these kids talking. Some people from the public came. But those kids felt great that somebody running for office wanted to know what they thought about policy. And some of those kids walked for us. Let me go on to the third thing. So the movement goals, and there's other things we did and things I'm sure you've done that are movement goals and strategies that work with our party. The third thing that's real important is green campaigns have to be nonviolent. And that's actually like one of the Big Ten, you know, from, you know, when Moses went to Minnesota, you know, although I understand they dropped one of the plates and rewrote one of them or something recently. Okay, so anyway, nonviolence is in there, okay? And we thought about this, and what does it mean to have a nonviolent campaign? And some things came to mind. Like, for instance, don't rip down other people's signs. Ever thought? I mean, I don't know about your campaigns, but there's a lot of signs, and it's garbagey and trashy stuff. But, you know, when I went down to take my signs down, I only could find 2 left. Somebody had already done the job for me, all during the campaign. And our pledge was not to do that. You know, it's a free country. So we didn't rip down people's signs. We didn't rip down their posters. We didn't take their mailers off their doors. Live and let live. And more significantly, we didn't do any negative campaigning. We did not slam anybody. We did not bring up anything personal about somebody. We did not criticize or attack anyone in a public forum. And this was really like, we thought, people were telling us we were dumb. Newspaper reporter, sympathetic. I'm a newspaper reporter. So if a buddy of mine calls up and he says, you know, you guys aren't going for the throat, man. I want better headlines. You know, go for it. You know, and we're just saying, hey, you know, I'm sorry. We're just not going to do that. And there was a lot of people doing that already, so I think he had plenty of headlines. But we did not do that, and it really paid off, because what happened is in my case, I did not win. Two other people that I ran against won. And one of those people who got the most votes and put the most into the campaign of the sort of Republican elderly that were running called me up and said, I want to appoint you to a city commission because I was really impressed by you. And I thought you had good things to say. And you said a lot about cultural diversity and diversity issues in La Mesa. And I want to appoint you to the Human Relations Commission as my appointee. And so I got business cards. I'll show you. So now I'm a commissioner. You got to call me the Commish. Commish Saint. Saint Commish. Well, and the reason I'm a commissioner and I have a public platform and I'm a city official and I have business cards and I can talk to the Rotary and stuff is because I never attacked Ruth Sterling. I was her buddy. I was respectful. I said, this is what I stand for, and that's what you stand for, and that's why we're running, so people can decide what they want. And so we made friends, and it worked. And I would recommend that you all be nice to everybody and show a lot of respect, and they'll just think the Greens are great. And so those are some of my thoughts. I know I've gone over time, but we can talk later. Just if nothing else, just remember this is an exciting time. Let's go out and reinvent politics. Thank you.